Can't get enough meetings, eh, Scott?
7 o'clock, the meeting will come to order. Grace Lesbrunz, Cascade Township Supervisor. Clerk Slater, please call the roll.
Trustee Nordhook.
Here.
Trustee McDonald.
Here.
Supervisor Lesbrunz.
Here.
Treasurer Pierce. Trustee Kessel.
Here.
Trustee Shipley.
Here.
Clerk Slater here.
Please rise if possible for the Pledge of Allegiance. United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion or discussion for approval of the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
It's a motion by Trustee Shipley, supported by Trustee McDonald, to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have no presentations tonight. But before we begin tonight's meeting, I want to make a brief statement and apologize if the actions that the board took at our last meeting caught some of you by surprise about the fire station project. We have been meeting and discussing this regularly over the past year and also well before I started as supervisor with chief majors, the firefighters, and our township's leadership team. But what we didn't do was take the important step of relaying all of those actions to you as residents. And for that, I'm sorry. We are taking steps now to increase our communications on Fire Station 1, and we want to make sure that residents who want to be involved and informed can be. At the last meeting, we as a board heard an update from the architect and the construction manager, and then reviewed preliminary interior designs of the interior and 2 exterior alternatives. After the presentation and some discussion, we then approved the architect and the construction manager to move forward with a more detailed design, and development plans. But I don't think we did a good job of communicating that what we did not do was we did not approve a budget for this project. That is still months down the road. And we did not approve final plans for this project. That too is still months down the road. What the vote that we took at this last meeting did was give the project the green light to move forward so that the fire department can continue to develop plans that will allow us to get to budget numbers. We will be holding an open house on Monday, March 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. on the fire station project so that residents can tour the current station, talk with both the architect and the construction manager, and also ask questions directly to chief majors. We'll also be holding a public meeting after we receive the budget numbers on the project and before we vote as a board on that. We expect that will be about May 11th. And all of this information will be mentioned at board meetings and also on our website. Residents are invited and encouraged to attend both meetings. And please look for a postcard mailed to your homes. There will be notice of both meetings electronically and also in our print newsletters. And we'll have that information on our website and different posts on social media. So I wanted to thank Chief Majors and all the firefighters who worked so hard to develop a plan that meets their needs now, but also for decades to come, and in a way that demonstrates fiscal responsibility. And I want to thank residents who have shared their feedback and asked some really good questions throughout the process. I hope that we'll continue to move forward. And I just wanted to apologize for the confusion or the poor presentation at the last board meeting. So we always welcome and value the input of residents, and we look forward to continuing that process. Thank you. This is the time for public comments, Article 5. Anything on the agenda not already scheduled for a public hearing, please keep your comments to 3 minutes and name and address for the record. Mr. Whitley?
Yeah, Chuck Whitley, 5030 Sequoia Drive. I really appreciate the open remarks by the supervisor. I've been attending many of these meetings. Even when I'm not here, I may be online or listen to them after the fact. And the interaction between some of the board members, in the beginning, there's been, some personal attacks and such. And it really, it seems like it's spilled over into the community, where the community members now think it's okay to come to this meeting and make personal attacks on individuals. And I find it very, upsetting that that sort of thing, happens. And as individuals, we should be better than what we have been. And as a community, we must be better than what we have been doing. So, I appreciate, what's being said here, but, when we have things that are, kind of clearly off topic of addressing the issues at hand, but being more, personal, vindictive, it really, it's upsetting, to have to listen to it all. So anything that can be done to make things, work better. I'm a little concerned, on some of the spillover, like from the Open Meetings Act, where it seems like, issues are being brought to this level by a single person because they haven't been allowed to talk to somebody else. They haven't been allowed to bounce things around. They haven't been allowed to get to some sort of consensus. And so it's kind of like left and right, proposals come in, and anything that, I've found in my business, that anything I do just purely by myself is not as good as if I have some input from somebody else. And so I don't know how you do that with an Open Meetings Act, and not turn it into a circus of a different, flavor. But, getting people to work together and come to a consensus without it being, so much of a conflict sort of thing, we need to move forward on that. Like I said, we must do better. As far as an item on the agenda, I would appreciate if the staffing request from Mr. Swayze, does that include enough people to go out after grants, matching funds, whatever? If we wanted to have solar panels on the fire station, there's got to be federal funds available for that, for example, and if we're not going out after that, it's kind of a false sense of thing. If we say, well, we don't have the people to do something like that, the federal government would love to just throw money for something like, who wouldn't love a firehouse with a solar panel on it? I personally don't like the idea of incorporating solar panels into a 100-year building because, there's something that should be attached to it and not part of it. Any solar panel bought today is not a 100-year appliance. So, but as far as today's agenda here, are we doing enough to reach out and partner, with other, government agencies to get stuff, done here in Cascade? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good points. Ms. Brott, do we have anyone wishing to comment virtually?
Actually, yes, we do. I'm going to, Mr. Merlin would like to speak. I'm going to ask him to unmute. Are you there, Mr. Merlin?
I am.
All right.
what I would like to speak to is the 4 job descriptions as well as the form of the evaluation for the HR, for the town manager. It seems as though the 4 job descriptions in general have an ambiguity inherent in them that leaves no one responsible for anything. We are left with in cooperation with or in partnership with. Well, who's accountable for getting something done on time and on budget? A similar flaw seemed to me to exist in the evaluation form, where there were goals set, but there were no measures attached to them. And this is something we found on the Round Hill project that beset our township, that it had no processes, no accountability. And as a result, we ended up spending more money than we needed to on some projects and left ourselves open for litigation, for example, in the Round Hill project, that was unnecessary if we'd had appropriate processes in place to get our work done. On the 4 jobs, I would ask the question is, if Mr. Swayze, when looking forward, what competencies does Cascade need at what levels? And how does one get there? These seem like Band-Aids that cover over the bigger problem of putting in proper process maps and process controls so that we in fact solve our personnel issues in a more thoughtful and effective manner.
Thank you, Mr. Merlin. Good points.
Would anyone else, would any one of our Zoom participants like to speak? Just go ahead and raise your hand. If you're participating via phone, please dial *9. I'll wait just a moment, Supervisor.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Mr. Rizzi?
Good evening. Scott Ritchie, 7238 Cascade Road. Mr. Merlin stole a little bit of my thunder here. I had a couple of comments I wanted to make. I guess I'll make comments regarding the review of Manager Swayze that I see you guys are going to talk about a little bit and start that process. This last year, we've all had obviously seen lots of challenges. One of those challenges is a lot of people have had staffing issues. And I know there have been delays in communication and responses from the township. In my case, I've experienced several from the manager's office. I believe that attribute a lot of that to the fact of a lack of staff, and that burdens, you lose 100 hours a week, 120 hours a week of labor in the office, and that trickles down the ladder and ends up in his corner to pick up the slack sometimes. But I guess I wanted to point out that in my lifetime, as far as being active in the township, I've had an experience with 4 township managers. And I believe that Ben has been the best of the 4 managers that I have worked with. He certainly has been proactive in trying to communicate with, most of my experience was leading a large neighborhood association, but he certainly worked with us. He heard us. He didn't give us a lot of drama. He was the most honest person to work with out of that group, certainly. I think he's been a little humble at times. I know we When I was president of the River Association, I reached out to Keir Brecken, who was president of the Ada Association, and we organized the first PFAS meeting, which happened in this room for Cascade Township. And we sent out, our association sent out hundreds of invitations to people in neighborhoods affected by PFAS. We got a lot of people to come, but nobody realizes that behind the scenes, Ben managed to get MDEQ, Eagle, the airport, the health department, Kent County, water treatment specialists, just everybody that he could to surround the room in tables so that the citizens would have somebody to talk to after the meeting to get further information. And, you know, that's one of the things he does in the background and I believe that that's the quality of a good manager. So I just wanted to point some of that stuff out. As you guys move forward with the process, I know that as a business owner, I hear lots of calls for whenever there's a problem, the phone rings, but I should say rarely, but the numbers are slanted, right? 90% of the calls are concerns and 10% are the pat on the back. So I just thought I'd reach out and say that I think he certainly has done a good job. But one quick thing is I do believe that administrative assistance would be helpful there, I think. But I want the township board to be cautious that while taking the approach of giving him some administrative assistance, we don't want to create a wall or barrier between the citizens and access to the manager. Because I think one of the qualities that's made Ben an effective manager is that citizens are, when they can get a hold of him, they're able to have access with him. And if we build a wall there, I think that could erode some of the good that can be accomplished. So that's what I have. Thank you.
That will conclude this portion of public comment. Thank you. Really good insight tonight from everyone. Article 6, approval of the consent agenda. Is there a discussion or a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
Shipley makes a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I just had a comment. Thank you. Last meeting, I asked for clarification on H fund, and I didn't get that. I don't know what we were transferring, what H fund is. I did find out what Parrot Pay was, and it's a merchant account. But I don't know how it's being used.
Yeah, so the H actually is just a typo in the system. Those were actually two invoices for 5 Alarm. So they're the company that serves our air packs in the fire department. So one of those invoices was for a air pack belt size for a female. The other invoice was for shipping and handling. We had a under warranty repair, but we have to pay to get it to them. So that's what those two are for. And the Pigeon Pay is actually the merchant processing system that is used by MIBiz, which is the Michigan business newspaper. So we buy a subscription to that every year, and that's just the credit card processing company that they use.
Okay, thank you. Then I had one more question you may be able to help me with. In the building department, the December intake was like $96,000, and it looked like there was a budget for like $155,000. That was on the commercial. How many commercial projects or what size projects do we have that all of a sudden boosted us by 96?
Yep, one big project. It is the concourse project over at the airport.
Thank you.
I support John's motion.
That's a motion by trustee Shipley, supported by trustee McDonald to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Article 7, financial actions. Is there a discussion or a motion for financial actions?
I'd motion to approve the December 21 financial statements pre-audit.
It's a motion by trustee Kessel, supported by treasurer Pierce, to approve the financial actions as stated. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Article 8, unfinished business. We have none tonight, so that brings us to new business, Article 9. First, item 008-2022, agreement for invasive plant treatment with Kent Conservation District. Manager Swayze?
Great, thank you. So in previous years, we've partnered with the Kent Conservation District to provide invasive plant management in various parks and public spaces throughout the township. So the continuous professional control of these invasive species ensures that the plants don't get out of control, and it allows for native plants to flourish in the parks. Treatment has occurred for various invasive plants, including bittersweet vine, barberry, knotweed, garlic mustard, autumn olive, buckthorn, multiflora rose, among others. So typically the control activities have taken place in Burton and Peace Parks, but in recent years, activities have spread to other township properties, including the Township Library property, which we did last year. And there's also a township property owned on Cascade Terrace that was chock full of garlic mustard that we did 2 years ago. So our 2022 proposed plan calls for treatment on various township properties, including Peace Park and Burton Park, the Cascade Terrace Park that I referenced, and also the 30th Street Cemetery. The program also calls for surveying of future treatment activities at other township parks and properties, including McGraw Park, Recreation Park, and Fire Station number 2. So the proposed cost of the 2022 program is just over $20,000. In your packet, I provided both the proposed agreement with KCD and the work plan for invasive plant treatment for 2022. So just a little bit about the Kent Conservation District. Their mission is to protect and enhance the natural resources of Kent County. They accomplish this through voluntary programs available for private landowners in rural and urban areas, such as habitat restoration assistance, Michigan agricultural environment assistance, verification, farm bill programs, and technical assistance to all landowners. So they're also a local provider of natural resource management, services that help Kent County citizens conserve their lands and our environment for a cleaner, healthier, economically stronger Michigan. And as a local special purpose unit of government, the KCD is governed by a locally elected 5-member board of directors. And the guiding philosophy of the Michigan conservation districts are that local people should make decisions on conservation issues at the local level with technical assistance provided by the government. And I did provide the website for the Kent Conservation District if you wanted to learn a little bit more about them. So utilizing the KCD services over the past several years have allowed us to keep the proliferation of invasive species of township parks and public spaces under control. In addition, they've provided several instructional courses to Cascade Township residents, which are hosted in our public spaces. There's actually one coming up at the end of February. So if you're interested in that, you can learn more about that on our website. So we had a meeting with Kent Conservation District, including our Parks Committee Chair, Jenny Wanty, our Buildings and Grounds Supervisor, Jim McDonald, and ourselves to review and make suggestions for the 2022 program under consideration. So the proposed work, as I mentioned before, comes to just over $20,000. And it's billed as activities occur rather than a lump sum. So it's not like we're paying and they go out and do it. They may do a little bit here in the winter and then bill us and so on and so forth. So I would treat it more as a not to exceed number than us just turning over $20,000. And it is budgeted throughout various areas in the budget. So if there's work in the parks, that comes out of the general fund, the parks budget. With the cemetery, there's a little bit of money in there. We have a lot of money in the open space fund because we continue to do a lot of management in there as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And the recommendation is to approve the agreement with KCD and authorize myself to execute it on behalf of the township.
Comments? First of all, as an owner of almost 5 acres in Cascade Township, I know what these invasive species are and how difficult it is to control them. Secondly, Kent County or Kent Conservation District benefits the individual by offering free of charge seedlings. For instance, pine seedlings, native plant seedlings. It's a great organization. They do good work. And once again, I'll be out pulling garlic mustard and other nasty weeds, but that's all I have to say.
I just want to say I agree with John. This is an investment. It's not an expense. It's an investment keeping our township good. I fought knotweed for 4 years. It is nasty stuff. It can take over and destroy everything native. It's unbelievable how fast that spreads and how invasive it is. So this is an investment in the township, and it's great for our parks and it's great for our residents, like you said, John.
Yeah, and for people that aren't aware of garlic mustard, it was brought in as a spice decades ago, but it emits a enzyme that will kill a full-grown oak tree if left unchecked. So, you know, these things are insidious. They're as bad as any disease that humans can contract as well. That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions?
I move to approve the agreement as proposed by Ben.
Support.
It's a motion by trustee McDonald, supported by trustee Shipley to approve the agreement as included in the packet. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Ben. And also thank you to Ginny Wanty on our Parks Committee. She has been a great advocate for Cascade on this topic. Next item, 009-2022. Consider township position realignment and addition. Manager Swayze?
Great, thank you. So as we're all aware, in late 2021, we received resignations from 2 department head level positions in the township. So typically when we receive resignations, it allows us for an opportunity to reevaluate both the effectiveness and the efficiency of our organization and possibly reallocate resources to functions that need more attention and or increase the effectiveness and efficiency of the township and the position. So as part of this process, I met with the township HR generalist and several department heads in order to review the organizational chart. And both Katie, our now interim HR director, and Brian, our interim planning director, are here. They were both key in the discussions and the development of several of these positions. And as a result of that process, I'm recommending the realignment of 4 positions in the organization, as well as the creation of 1 new position. So these recommendation also results in the elimination of 4 positions. So the realigned positions that I am recommending to start off with, the first one is the Director of Public Works. For this position, under the direction of the Township Manager, the Director of Public Works is responsible for overseeing the physical assets of the township, including public facilities, public spaces, parks, and pathways. This person would also serve as the township point of contact for township infrastructure partnerships, including utility infrastructure, roadway infrastructure, and drain infrastructure. And this person would provide technical expertise and administrative support to the Township Manager and the Township Board regarding physical assets of the township. The next position would be Planning Director. And if it sounds familiar, it's because we have had a Planning Director in the past. Under the direction of the Township Manager, the Planning Director is responsible for overseeing the planning administration and day-to-day operations of the Planning Department to assure community-wide compliance where applicable township development codes and ordinances. This person prepares and implements the township's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and other land use policies. This person provides technical support and administrative support to the Planning Commission, Zoning Board, and Township Board. The next position would be the Zoning Administrator. The Zoning Administrator, under the direction of the Planning Director, is responsible for the administration, interpretation, and enforcement of all township ordinances, as well as providing support to the programs of the Planning Department. And the 4th position would be the Director of Human Resources. This position, under the direction of the Township Manager, would be responsible for planning and coordinating human resource management activities of the township to maximize the strategic use of human resources and maintain functions such as employee compensation, recruitment, personnel policies, and regulatory compliance. And then, as I mentioned, there'd be a 5th new position created. This would be the Management Office Administrative Assistant. And this position would be responsible for serving as administrative support and receptionist for the manager's office and providing a broad range of administrative tasks. So each one of the position recommended job descriptions for those are in your packet. And after I get through this, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about specific items in each one of those job descriptions. As I mentioned, this realignment would result in the elimination of 4 positions as well. The first position eliminated would be the Community Development Director. Those responsibilities have generally been allocated to the Planning Director and the Director of Public Works position. The Assistant Township Manager position would be eliminated, and those responsibilities have generally been allocated to the Human Resources Director, the Zoning Administrator, and the Management Office Administrative Assistant. The human resources generalist position would be eliminated, and the responsibilities have been allocated to the director of human resources with support from the management office administrative assistant. And the planner position would be eliminated, and those responsibilities were generally allocated to the planning director, zoning administrator, and other existing positions in the organization. So I feel that the realignment of these 4 positions and the creation of the 5th position will allow the township to allocate resources more effectively to areas of need. With the creation of the Director of Public Works position, that really allows us to bring a civil engineering expertise to the township that we don't currently have with in-house staff. So we rely heavily on outside entities, primarily Fishbeck for township engineering. And while you'll never completely eliminate the use of engineering firms, this will allow us to do a lot of that low-level and mid-level engineering work in-house and potentially save us money on the monies that we do budget for engineering services. This also dedicates an employee to project management. We have several large-scale projects on the horizon, and also allows for a department head level staff to be dedicated to our parks, pathways, and public spaces, and provides dedicated leadership to the Buildings and Grounds Department. The planning director and zoning administrator positions return to a model of a dedicated planning department. We all know that we're continuing to see an increase in the complexity of development projects in the township as the easy square flat parcels are eliminated. The redevelopment of existing parcels or the development of challenging parcels provides more and more the need for more and more absolute expertise in the planning department. I feel like having a rededicated planning staff would be important. We also have several recommendations that came from the Round Hill Subcommittee, and having a dedicated planning department will help us implement those recommendations. This also provides for an employee dedicated both to general and zoning code enforcement duties that were previously divided between several township employees. And the human resource director position dedicates an employee to all levels of human resource administration where those duties were previously divided between several administrative positions. And then, of course, the creation of the management office administrative assistant provides some much needed administrative support to several key positions in the township, including the township manager, human resources director, and public services administrator, and really provides another readily available touch point for the public. I think out of all the positions, this might be the one that people are most excited for to help us with some of those administrative functions. A great example, Christy did a great job over the past year getting our passport office open. It's fantastic to see people coming in. They're excited because they're going on a vacation to a different country, and she's done a great job, but she also is going to have a lot of additional duties coming up with 2 major elections. She can't dedicate 6 hours a day to processing passports. So, just one example is this allows us to have a second person to be able to do passports. So her time isn't completely dedicated to it. And I'm sure Katie can come up with, a dozen or so things that she would need help with as a human resources director. And I certainly could use the help as well. So with that, the 4 position realignments actually have a net neutral impact on the township budget. So the elimination of the salaries and benefits for the 4 positions that were eliminated. They're not a 1-for-1 transfer to the other positions, but some levels are higher and some levels are lower, and it actually really balances out. So the additional cost of the township comes from the addition of the 5th position. The estimate is that position would add $55,000 to $75,000 to the township budget, dependent on the benefits that are elected. And I will know that the cost allocations for all the positions are already included in our fiscal year 2022 budget. So no budget amendment would be needed to implement that. And with that, myself, Katie, and Brian are all here to answer any questions you have.
And under your scenario, if a Round Hill type project came up again, who would be responsible for overseeing the project?
So from a development perspective, the planning director would be responsible for that position. However, with the creation of the public works director position, the idea is to have some civil engineering expertise there. So there would be some co-work on things like stormwater ordinance, right? So we have a lot of more stormwater responsibilities. We have somebody that can actually go there and make sure that it's designed like it's engineered, rather than having, a third party come out and do that. But if you're talking specifically about the development project, it'd be the responsibility of the planning director. Of course, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from my father was that you can dedicate authority, but you can't dedicate responsibility. And that always comes back to me, right? So I'm in charge of the planning director. Ultimately, all of that work is my responsibility as well.
Who would oversee enforcement to make sure so the developers such as Round Hill were complying with the plans?
So during the project, again, that would be the planning director. However, once the project is done, the enforcement activities don't stop. So that's when that would really transfer to the zoning administrator. So now we have somebody that's dedicated to making sure that even when projects are finished, they're following all the ordinances, all the rules and responsibilities of the township.
Oh, go ahead, Sue.
I was just going to say, those three positions, Director of Public Works, Planning Director, Zoning Administrator, are really going to work very closely together. There's going to be a great deal of overlap. Would you say?
Yeah, and I certainly understand the comments that Mr. Merlin made at the beginning, but the truth of the matter is everything we do in the township is team-based. We actually try to get away from the silos, and there certainly needs to be responsibilities. There needs to be a place where the buck stops. But because of the size of our organization and the complex nature of the things we do, a lot of times projects are going to have 2 or 3 people working on it. For example, this person would really become the project manager for any big projects that are happening in the township. And we know that hopefully one of the big projects is going to be the fire department project, right? This person isn't going to cut the fire chief out of the fire station project. He's going to be very in there, but he's going to be able to provide the technical civil engineering expertise that we currently don't have for projects like that. So there's always going to be some crossover, but I certainly understand the need to, have a point of responsibility as well.
I think I'd like to see a little more detail in these descriptions before we approve them. I don't see any word in here about these Director of Public Works being engineer.
It's in the job description.
So it's actually in a couple places. So in the basic knowledge and skills, the expectation is they have expert knowledge of civil engineering principles, practices, and procedures. In the minimum education and background, bachelor's degree in civil engineering, construction management, public administration, or related field. Same thing with the years of responsibility. And then we also prefer an American Society of Civil Engineers certified person.
All right.
Mr. Shipley?
Now my turn?
Mhm.
Okay. Ben, first of all, I'm the first one to say that you need an administrative assistant, okay? I don't know how you can do without it. And I want to recognize Mr. Whitley and Mr. Merlin and Mr. Rizzi's comments, and your concerns. Failure to get back to people is one of my big concerns. I had the same question as Timmy down there had about the civil engineering. And looking at this, there actually may be some savings here if that person that you want to hire on can replace some of the hourly rate of our contracted engineer. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the example I've kind of used through the process for some of those low-level items is every year we do a pathway repair program,
Sure.
right? And we pay our township engineer to come out and put together a program and detailed drawings and send that out. And we pay anywhere between $135 and $225 an hour,
Sure.
depending on who works on that, right? That is something that this person would be expected to be able to do. And even at the top end of the pay scale with all the benefits, we're maybe paying this person $100 an hour.
Yeah.
So the more of that low level engineering work that they can take on, there are going to be some savings. Now, you're not going to replace the engineer that we hired to do the fire station project.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I do believe that when it plays out, there will be less township money being spent on third-party engineering services.
Okay. So the financial wizards that we have here, like Mr. Kessel and our treasurer, they'll probably be keeping an eye on that to see if that keeps going down through the year. We had one other question too. What the heck was it? Oh, yeah, I know what it was. These positions that you're proposing, are they somebody that's in-house that you're considering, or are they new people coming on board?
So I do have, we'll end up having a couple recommendations for a couple of the positions, specifically the planning director and human resources director. So those recommendations will be forthcoming after the positions are created.
Okay, understood. But in some of the technical things like the director of public works, you'll probably have to go outside.
We don't have anybody in-house with the expertise that I'd be looking for that position.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
I can remember several years ago when we sat down and met with Ben, and Ben had an idea of creating a different form of structure than what we had then. We went with that and we used it for quite a few years, but in thinking through this structure, we're going back to kind of the way things were before, but we're adding this public works director, which to me, and John mentioned and others, is a real benefit to the township. It can be a cost savings, not only on pathways, but you know, when you look at engineering and you look at Round Hill, if this person has that expertise to get involved in that project earlier, and Scott, this committee, the Round Hill, had committees about procedures that we follow going forward that we may not have followed so well on Round Hill. I think this type of position is going to go a long ways to helping us not get in trouble like that again, as well as having that zoning and administration position and the planning director. So instead of having it fall in one person's lap and Ben being ultimately responsible, we have now the ability to create a situation where in any project, not just Round Hill, but any big project, I think we have the oversight of 3 different types of positions, and hopefully with planning commission recommendation or the Round Hill committee in these positions, we're going to find that we're not going to get into that kind of trouble again.
And I concur with Jim's opinions. The only danger here is that when you got more than one person responsible for something, there's a potential like, well, he should have known or she should have known, or was his job or her job. And that's where you'd have to really depend on Ben to say, no, it was his job, not her job.
Yeah, it's really, you're right, important to work as a team on the whole project and not be pointing fingers, but working in conjunction with each other to make sure things are done right.
As far as one comment about measurements, I don't know how you would measure positions like this. You know, did they make 90% of their budget? You know, these positions are kind of hard to measure. Ben, you got any ideas on that? How would you measure them for their evaluations?
Yeah, so we have a evaluation process that we use. It's based, half of it is based on the essential functions that appear in these job descriptions. So we go through each year and talk about those essential functions and what went well and what didn't well. That's more of an art form than science. And then part of that process is goal setting for the next year and review of the goals for the previous year. So that's really where the rubber hits the road, where if you have a specific goal for you set for somebody, at the end of the year, you're going to know whether they accomplished it or not. You know, there's reason I haven't had an evaluation yet where somebody's accomplished all those goals. So for some reasons they don't happen, but it gives you a touch point, and then it's a reality of things. These are what it was expected this year, and this is how it actually.
I got to ask you a question. As a manager, do you ever feel responsible for a subordinate not reaching their goals?
Absolutely.
All right, that's the answer I wanted.
Treasurer Pierce?
I think one way of measuring it is take an average year on what we're spending on engineering and compare it to what happens when you bring it in-house.
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely.
And because that kind of goes up and down too, the other thing that I was thinking is you can actually just track, you know, as this person is assigned projects that I know would have gone to the township engineer beforehand, you know, I can make an estimate as to we saved X amount of hours by using this in-house person rather than an engineer. So I'll try to make a point of that to do that and provide feedback to the board on a semi-regular basis.
If the board were to say, yeah, this is good, go ahead, when would you implement it? This month,
immediately.
next month, immediately?
Yep, so I have a meeting on a different topic with Katie tomorrow, but this would certainly be added to the process. It'll be a phased process, so, but it's something that I would anticipate would be well underway in March and absolutely fully implemented by the end of second quarter.
Manager Swayze, what about on the bottom of page 2, when we're talking about, we've got basic knowledge and skills, and I think we all pretty much agree that we need and want someone with a civil engineering background. If we, at the very last sentence or portion, minimal education and background, right now it reads bachelor's degree in civil engineering, construction management, public administration, or a related field. I guess my preference would be to take out public administration because it's such a, public administration is a real broad and engineering is so specific, I think.
Yeah. So I guess the only thing that I would caution is that there are people out there that get their degree in public administration and then move on to other places, and they may have a great civil engineering experience without actually having that degree itself. But, you know, in the end, that's probably the exception rather than the rule. You know, if we really want to emphasize that, I don't have a problem striking that.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
If they have a bachelor's degree in public administration, but then the master's degree you really want in civil engineering, then you aren't shutting the door on a potential candidate as well.
The other thing we could do is add a line in there that says candidates without education in civil engineering and construction management must demonstrate real life experience.
There you go.
I think
Good
that's a
idea.
good idea. That would resolve any potential conflict down the road.
I can add that in, no problem.
Trustee Nordic?
I think I'd like to add under the office administrative assistant, I just want to point out that our supervisor is a part-time employee. And being part-time, I think she deserves to have some administrative support as well. And I don't see this in there for our supervisor. Whether it be
Ben's
this
job.
supervisor or the next supervisor.
Joking, I'm teasing.
But I think,
Have to,
I do
not
think
really.
as a part-time employee, she's spending a lot more time and she could use a little assistance in the background. I see assistance for everybody else, but I think she needs it too.
What about the board? Just including the reference to the board?
I need my own assistant.
I want one at home and here.
No, I better not make comment.
I shouldn't have made the last one. What about that though? Referencing the board of trustees?
Yep, I think that's appropriate.
He's scribbling it in, so.
Thank
And-
you.
Director of Human Resources and Planning Director, Mr. Hilbrands and Ms. Murkowski, you guys have absolutely stepped up and you were meant to be right where you are. So thank you. Kind of for formality, but you've already been doing it and we appreciate both of those departments being run so smoothly. Didn't miss a beat.
Thank you. I absolutely share those sentiments. I don't know what I would have done over the past 3 or 4
No.
months without them. They've really stepped up their game and can't tell them how much I appreciate that.
The parts that I feel like haven't been able to get back to residents quickly enough, or we're kind of left, are really in that operations director, engineering, kind of project management. But as far as human resources and even the planning department, I think we're doing great.
I've made a promise to Brian that he'll be able to see his desk by the end of next quarter.
Do you have everything you need within if we include these jobs or realignments?
I do, I would think so. I think that should cover everything once we get those people in those positions.
Process wise, is there anything?
Well, I think with the Round Hill recommendations, I think we'll be taking a deep look in that, and that's probably one we'll try to evaluate what processes can be improved.
So I have a question. So if we approve this realignment, then we're authorizing Ben to go ahead. Is that correct? We don't necessarily have to approve who he's going to pick, even though we kind of have an idea.
Oh, my God.
As long
We're
as he picks the
authorizing Ben
right
to go
ones.
ahead, correct?
I do always bring department head level recommendations back to the board. I think that's appropriate. The lower level positions, that typically does not happen.
in response to Timmy's suggestion, in the job description, it says provide communication services and support to the township manager's office, elected officials and internal departments.
There you
Seems
go.
like it covers.
Look at that. Maybe I should have Ken be my assistant. He could save me an hour of trying to wordsmith that
You can't afford me.
tomorrow.
Manager Swayze, what about, to Mr. Whitley's point, for grant writing? Like I know at the Parks Committee, that keeps coming up and we don't have a Parks Director right now, so but the issue keeps coming up because there are a lot of grants out there that we,
I think we've had a fair amount of success with grant writing with the staff that we have. We're always up against the issue that we're a well-funded community and a lot of the grants go to low mod income communities, but you know, we put together a team that put in the successful C2R2 grant for the PFAS stuff. I know in the fire department, they have one of their command officers that specifically writes grants for them. So we do have some of that, you know, it's hard to be a department head level position in local government without having some grant writing experience. So I don't know at this point if there would be a really wouldn't, you know, so some larger communities like a city of Grand Rapids actually has a grant writer where that's all they do. And we're probably not at that level yet. But I think that there's capacity within, especially with these new positions, there's capacity within the organization to continue to write those grants.
where would we have, like, who in the organization would have that expertise, focused knowledge on like environmental issues, like the river, parks, that kind of stuff?
So we always pull together a team when we do those grants, right? So for example, with the C2R2 grant, we didn't, we included the city of Grand Rapids because they had the expertise that we needed. So if we were going to do environmental, the Kent Conservation District would be a great resource for us to pull in. In fact, I think Ginny, so Ginny actually did write a grant for some of the invasive species stuff last year and pulled them in as a subject matter expert. So we have so many partners out there that allows us to, you know, capture that knowledge, and they're always interested in helping the community.
We can ask Trustee McDonald to help out.
Yeah. There was a interesting article in the MTA this week that offered grants for the fire department. And usually when I see those, I'll just copy and paste them and send them to Ben, Adam, or whatever. And I was surprised to get a response back from Adam right away. And I forget which of the firefighters had already worked on submitting the request for the grant. So I guess depending upon what area the grant falls in, people around here have been able to submit and get grants approved for their area of responsibility. So I thought that was great.
Captain Stevenson is the grant writer in the fire
Stevenson,
department.
yeah, okay, that's who he mentioned, yeah.
Mr. Merlin had brought up in the past, the idea of like a whiteboard, or maybe it's a virtual whiteboard where internally, but then also residents might be able to see, you know, major projects. So right now we've got the city water to the PFAS affected neighborhoods and the fire station. But as they come up, residents can see a kind of a timeline and also the responsible party information on those projects. What do you think about that?
Yeah, can certainly work on something like that.
Thought it was a good idea.
With,
Further, oh, sorry, go ahead, Trustee
go ahead.
Kessel. No, I was just gonna see if any further
I was
discussion.
gonna say, yeah, so I was just gonna put out there that we've had some good discussion and good recommendations for some changes, and with those, I'd recommend we go ahead and move forward with the realignment as proposed.
Support.
It's a motion by Trustee Kessel, supported by Trustee McDonald, to approve the realignments and postings as included in the packet. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item 010-2022. This is the Township Manager Annual Performance Evaluation. It does not require board action, but if there's any discussion or questions, now is the time. And those are available hard copy or in an email in a Word document that you could type into.
I had a question, and it didn't get a chance before the meeting to look up the evaluation. We had, is this slightly different, Katie, than the one we used before? It had,
Yeah, this goes by on the numbers instead of with the NI as proficient and all of that. So it's a number scale. Grace
okay,
had changed it a little bit.
yeah, I noticed that was different. So instead, we're to take each one and rate 1 to 5 on those categories. And how about the at the end where we talk about specific improvement? Are we gonna do that together, or do you want each of us to put down our own thoughts as to what they should be? Grace, I'm asking you.
Probably both. Put down what you think they should be, and then collectively as a board, we'll discuss it during the evaluation.
That's in my experience when I've been involved in 360 evaluations. Everybody's comments were included and then considered.
And we don't do that yet right now, right?
You don't
That would
do
be a good,
360s. Find out what your people really think of you.
in some
Don't be
ways that would
nervous,
be good,
Ben.
and in some, baby steps, Ben. I know this past year has been rough, so we'll just.
In terms of the process though, Katie, you want us to fill each of these out individually with the comments and then submit them and then give them to you, correct?
Correct.
And then
yes.
they'll come, okay.
I personally like the numbering system rather than the lettering system.
Yeah, it really is easier.
Even with the numbering system, the thing that's most important when you're looking for performance improvement are the comments.
Mhm.
You know, numbers don't mean much, but the comments do.
It's harder to average letters.
If you see any minus numbers, Katie, take them out.
Ben, any comments or questions?
Nope, I look forward to evaluation, and I absolutely agree with John. You know, while I certainly look at and take heart either the letter evaluation or the number evaluation, the comments are really the ones that help me improve year after year. So the more comments you put in there, positive, negative, or indifferent, the better.
Thanks, Ben. Article 10, we have no items that are just for discussion tonight, so then that will bring us to the next public comment session, Article 11. Anyone wishing to speak, please come to the podium. Try to keep it to 3 minutes. And then we'll see if there are anyone virtually. Mr. Whitley, I hope you noticed the improvement.
Very nice, thank you. Yeah, in the past, as part of my responsibilities to the River Association, I have been contacted by township staff, I think Steve Peterson in particular, on the flood maps that were being done by FEMA, and there was an update process there. And so he reached out to the various associations to help get the word out that such things were happening and whatnot. And so, you know, I hope that the new people get, you know, made aware that you know, that there's resources, you know, within the community that should be partners and, you know, and kept in the loop there. So that's the only thing I really have to say right now, is that appreciated in the past when we got things like that, so that we could in fact, you know, push it out to our members and whatnot. So, you know, hope with a turnover that that same spirit continues.
Thank you.
So we do have a couple. I'm going to first allow Keely Shea to talk. Keely, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So I first have a question before I share anything else. I'm wondering if the forensic audit results that were ordered last fall to look into the several highly questionable, if not illegal matters with Cascade Township government and staff, including the misuse and or transfer of taxpayer and federal funds, have those been presented and provided to the public yet?
Not yet, and I'm hoping it should be available soon. I'll touch base because I know they were wrapping up and we're just waiting to hear from our attorneys. But hopefully next meeting or shortly after.
Well, thank you for that. Because truly, just listening, I know there's a lot of reviews going on. It sure seems like it would be prudent to have those results back. I don't know, you know, the entire process of that, but I think that's important, especially given this has been going on for so long. So I just want to share that I realized so clearly that if we, the people, not the elected or the government hired personnel, do not speak up, for goodness sake, then goodness is a long way off from returning to our communities and the world. And as a former resident, 15 years in Cascade Township, including raising my 3 sons in Cascade, and with continuing care for Cascade and all of Michigan, and really for the goodness to return to all of our country and the world, I'm very concerned about the clear lack of transparency and follow through that I have witnessed with Cascade governance since July of 2020. Our neighborhood, Alaska Ridge, presented clear documentation, including but not limited to the misappropriation of federal COVID relief funds granted to Cascade that were subverted from real residents' needs, which clearly met the grant requirements and were instead applied, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was made clear by the notes that were submitted that was Manager Swayze that reapplied those funds to 2020 voting equipment. Over $45,000 of federal relief funds, which were clearly not included as an allowable COVID relief expense. So this was, thank you. This was all documented with proof, and it really didn't even seem to require an audit. But unless we can be shown clearly in the grant stipulations where the purchase of voting equipment qualifies as an allowable COVID relief expense to Cascade. So as a review, besides the seemingly obvious misappropriation of funds, this expense for the voting system was not even approved by the old township board. When Rob, the old supervisor, I can't remember his last name, was the
30
supervisor.
seconds.
That board, instead of voting to provide internet to the Alaska Ridge residents, opted to appropriate the 45,000 plus to items such as hand sanitizer. So I love quotes, and the quote that I think applies to this is, the chief problem in historical honesty is not outright lying. It is omission or de-emphasis of important data. So I would just encourage you to really, let's address the root of the problem before we move forward. Thank you so much for all you do. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shea.
All right, now we have Mr. Merlin. Are you there? Mr. Merlin?
Am I better now?
There you go.
Okay, the first question I'd like to address is in the pre-audit numbers and in the fund balance for the CARES Act, I see, and in a separate fund total that I saw in the materials, I saw the CARES Act having $709 in it. But when I look at the $1 million, it's in that CARES Act fund. So how do those kinds of mistakes occur? And doesn't that fund actually have $1 million in it, not just $709 in it? Second comment I would ask is that I have repeatedly asked for, and I think board members have as well, for a list of the projects to which dollars in the funds are committed. We never get an answer to that question. It seems to be the great unknown. And I would like to actually know what projects has Cascade committed money to for which we don't know about. The third comment I would like to make is that while the third comment I'd like to make is with regard to the Director of Public Works. It seemed to be very unusual that it was framed 7 years of experience in increasingly progressive positions and 2 years in some type of supervisory role. I did not see any required experience in actually being in control of budget and timing to get a project done
1
as a
minute.
true project manager. Is there a person that has already been identified by our town manager to whom those 2 and 7 year numbers, which are very unusual in my experience, and I have led an HR department, is there someone he is thinking about to apply that would fit those criteria, even if that person does not have any project management experience?
30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr.
And-
Merlin. Oh, go ahead.
Does anyone want to answer any of those questions? Or I could have a lot more here, but I am not going to waste my time raising them if they're not going to be any answers anyway.
10 seconds.
Okay, we'll look at. And what about the CARES Act and then is that the ARP funds, the 2 different federal stimulus monies that came through to the township?
It just looks like the cover sheet for the report isn't updated, so I will talk to Liz and make sure that we get that updated, and I will resubmit it to the board.
So did both of those go into the same account, same fund?
CARES Act, yeah, CARES Act and the ARPA funds are all in that one fund.
And have we spent any of those ARP funds?
No.
What about Mr. Merlin's question about committed dollars? Does that, can we answer that?
Yep, so the cover sheet has those commitments, but it doesn't say what they're for, so we can work on, so this cover sheet is in an Excel spreadsheet, whereas everything else comes out of our financial software. So I'll talk to Liz and see if we can designate some comment area on this front sheet where there are committed funds as to what those funds are actually committed for. And include that as part of the monthly financial reports going forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
And what about the Director of Public Works description?
Yeah.
Project manager. It's a
I
good point.
I don't have anybody in mind for that. Those requirements were actually designed by Katie and approved by me. So no, I don't have anybody in mind for that. If anybody does know anybody with that type of experience, though, please let me know. It is definitely a worker's market out there. So we have our work cut out for us in attracting people.
And this position would be that of project management, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good point. Any other residents wishing to comment? Mr. Rizzi?
Scott Rissy, 7238 Cascade Road. I wasn't going to speak again, but those comments, I guess, motivated me to. Over the course of time, I have heard a lot about the internet woes of the Alaska Ridge neighborhood. And I share, or maybe I should say share, I have experience in that same position that they're in. And when I moved back to Cascade on Cascade Road, I found that I myself did not have internet available at my house. And I was given a price of $2,800 to have Comcast run the wire to my house because it had to be more than 300 feet long. And I didn't come to the township to get help with that. And through this process of hearing their woes and they're reaching out, I've heard a lot of references that they are the only ones around that don't have internet. And while I solved my problem, I know that there are other people in the township that share in that same hardship. And so I would caution you to be careful, because if you open that door and providing or helping assistance with internet to the people in Alaska Ridge, people like myself, who just recently in the last 5 years had to do it themselves, will probably be somewhat irritated about that. So I realized that their situation is maybe a little unachievable on their own. And, you know, the scale, I guess, is a little different. But my point is that there are other people out there that are on the beaten path that you would expect would have options. And in my case, both options because the wire that crossed Cascade Road had been damaged at some point and had been ignored for years by both AT&T and Comcast. And so I had to solve that. So I'm just throwing that out there, that be cautious because you don't want to upset somebody who might be on Spalding or Burton, who is in that boat. And it's almost offensive to hear that, you know, we're not out there when we are. Thank you.
Thank you. And Manager Swayze, am I remembering correctly that Comcast holds that information pretty tightly as far as who's serviced and who's not?
They do, yes. While our franchise agreement requires them to provide us information about who they can provide cable to and who they do provide cable to and those string maps. As we talked about several times, internet's not a regulated utility, and they've flat out just denied us access to any of that information. To the point where even with the Alaska Ridge, they would only include a cloud circle around the areas that they possibly don't serve. So they hold that information very tightly to their vest. Though I will say, I have heard from onesies and twosies that had the same issue that Scott has, that while there's internet in front of their house sits 500 feet off of the road. I have not heard from any large scale neighborhoods that don't have the infrastructure in there as well. At some point, you know, once we decide how to move forward with those ARPA funds, I would recommend that we survey the community and figure out exactly where those other pockets may exist.
And then just for the members of the public, initially Comcast's initial quote, and then when it turned out the board actually was ready to approve it, the new quote, just to add a layer of difficulty and frustration to the issue.
Yeah. And we've addressed that with them. We've actually had our legal counsel address that with them because they had relationships with Comcast in developing other projects. And it simply seems to be that the person that gave us our initial quote didn't have the authority or the expertise to actually create that quote. So the initial quote was basically just extending the service from where it is to where it needs to be. And when they actually look at the background, they have to put 4 miles of infrastructure in order to serve that neighborhood. So what we've moved to now is trying to identify, okay, if there is 4 miles of infrastructure that are needed, are there other areas that aren't served by Comcast that could tap into that as well? There's no reason to put 4 miles of infrastructure in for 12 houses. But if there's other neighborhoods that would potentially connect to that, Comcast will pay more and more of the cost of the project, the more and more potential customers they have. So if all of a sudden they have 100 potential customers rather than 12 potential customers, they would cover more. And then of course, we're still trying to push the county to finish up their program, which would be double the amount of funds that we or anybody put into it. So the pieces are out there. We just need to bring them all together.
Thanks.
County executive addressed that in his last monthly issue, didn't he?
I don't know. I wasn't able to attend.
It was the written one.
What's that?
The written one.
Do you remember what he said?
Hmm?
Do you remember what he said? Did he give any updates?
He just said that they were continuing to investigate it and analyze it and work with the feds. He didn't give any time. It was at least addressing.
Mhm. So it went from like what's up for 60,000 to over 200?
Yeah.
Based on that infrastructure improvement, they had to.
Yeah.
Anyone else in the audience? Just how about briefly?
Keely, if you have something briefly to say, I can allow you to talk 1 moment.
Thank you. I would just like to address what Scott Rissy was appealing. It sounded like to not give Alaska Ridge. I think again, you guys were missing the point. The point was this was about COVID relief funds, but all the children that were home during the lockdowns and that some still continued. This was all brought up during that. Alaska Ridge had not sought help except when we learned that there were funds that were appropriated for this. So the question isn't really that. The question is, can you please answer my question? Can you show us in the documentation where it was allowed that $45,000 be spent of COVID relief funds on voting equipment? Can you please show us that? We're not addressing the real root of the problem.
I hear you, Ms. Shea. And that, hopefully the audit, I can't say for sure because I haven't talked to them, but will be within the next meeting or two.
Okay,
And then that will be expressly answered.
thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And that's it.
Okay. Article 12, Manager Swayze.
Just wanted to say we had a great meeting in this room a week ago on Thursday to kick off our communication with the residents on the PFAS water relief extension project. So we had about 60 people attend in person and another 60 or so online. Thought everybody asked great questions. We had a lot of subject matter experts there. The city of Grand Rapids was there. The project manager from Prine and Newhoff was there. Our township legal counsel was there. Eagle was there. Everybody seemed to be appreciative of the information. So we now have a project webpage up on our website. We also have a project webpage for the fire department as well. We have had Hunter and Sandra and Mary Ann and all of our communication staff working in overdrive to get all that information out. So great resources out there if you haven't checked it out yet. We have links to it. If you get onto our website, you have the pictures that scroll through on top, and we started using that to put all of our really important stuff there. So it's very prominent. And as we get more information, we will put it up there. That's all I got.
Thank you. Article 13, any board member comments
Of course,
besides Trustee Shipley?
always stand up and thank you people for coming down here, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate it. The only thing I say is I beseech you to bring your neighbor next time too. And answers are not always fast coming. Improvement is always continuing, and that's what we strive to do. That's all I have.
All right. Anyone else? I'd like to thank Sabo Communications, who we have. There has been a lot of really great stuff going on in the background, and I think as a board or as supervisor, at least, who did a really poor job of sharing that with the community. So especially on the fire station, appreciate you guys working really hard this past week to give residents the answers they need and they should have already had. So thanks a ton for your help. And the website has a lot of really good information on that right now. Hopefully in the future, it'll be more communications and less crisis management. Anyone else?
All for the question.
Anyone have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
It's a motion by Trustee Shipley, supported by Trustee McDonald to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you for the residents.
Some of them have a host to go.
Yeah.
But I remember looking at